I started performing this effect years ago. It was literally one of the first card effects that I ever learned in my life. Obviously, I learned it from Rene Lavande, who is one of my mentors, one of the guys who I look up to the most. And I saw him do this wonderful piece of magic. I saw it on video. And I knew that I had to learn how to do it. I bought his books and I learned how to do the routine, how he did it anyways. And that was, for me, just such an eye-opening experience. In the months that followed, I would try to come up with my own techniques and just perform the effect without much presentation. I mean, when I say not much presentation, I was lacking the presentational skills, but also the technical skills. So I was just going through it, red, black, red, black, red, black, turning over the cards. No magical reason to anything, and I was really struggling with the routine. When I first started performing the routine, I did not have success from it. In front of regular audiences, I did not see much success from it. And also in front of magicians. Magicians were impressed by me doing it as I evolved in the techniques. But one of my good friends, and he said this to me at a convention, he said, "Matty, it's very impressive, but it's not deceptive. You know, I'm not fooled by it. It's impressive. What you're doing technically is impressive, but it's not deceptive." So for me, that was very shattering, because I thought, wow, I put in all this work into this routine, and you really hope that it's getting better with time and evolving. But when I heard that, it was a very painful thing to hear. So I went back to the drawing board. Actually, that changed a lot of my magic in terms of my thinking. Instead of having things that were just impressive, making things extremely deceptive, where it's also impressive, but you're not impressed by the skill, you're impressed by you don't see anything happening, you just feel the magic happening. So when my friend told me that, I went back and I worked on the techniques. In the beginning, I was using a lot of the techniques that Rene Lavande was using. I was using the second deals. It was virtually my handling of and trying to copy what Rene Lavande was doing. The problem with that is I could not do the same techniques that Rene Lavande was doing. So, and my adaptations of his techniques at that time were not deceptive. I was working on a second deal, but it wasn't, it was okay, but it wasn't good enough. And it's one of those things where it's like, if something's not good enough, it's not usable. Never forget that in magic, and that's been a lesson for me over and over. Something's not good enough, it's not usable. So it's like, there's no such thing as good enough. It either works or it doesn't work. There's, all these little things in the middle. This is a, what do they call it? This is a move. This is a utility move. All that stuff was not good enough for me, because I wanted to bring my magic to a different place. So working on it years and years, working on the routine, and I was still performing the routine, and friends who have seen me performing this years ago can tell you, wow, yeah, because they can track the process over more than a decade of me performing this. I've been performing this piece of magic since I was 17 years old. So right now it's 2020. It's been, 14 years, 13 years? It's been a while. And I can honestly say that it's a completely different routine now, but that evolution was very slow, getting the techniques to a point. That first technique that you see me do, that exchange, that secret slip of the cards, that is something that I did not start out with. That first move I was doing just like Rene Lavande. If you're familiar with Rene Lavande's technique, you will know the first phase he does a second deal in order to exchange those cards. That's what I was doing. then I came up with this. Why did I come up with this? Because it's easier for me, it's more deceptive. And then you see, that's what I did with the whole routine. I slowly looked at it, and mind you, much of the stuff that I do in this routine, the techniques, are stuff that I have created and worked on. And a lot of the stuff doesn't look as good, it didn't look as good back then as it does now. So it's been a lot of work, a lot of experimentation, and then taking the stuff that works and then really putting it in the fire of real world experience, making sure that it works, making sure that it does stand the test, when you have it in front of people, and then bringing it out into the audience, deploying it full scale in a lot of my magic. But even as I've been bringing it out, it's been improving all these techniques. So all the work that you see me doing with the second deals, with the switching of the cards, with the buckling of the cards, holding those doubles, all that stuff has slowly been incorporated throughout the years, and it's been a slow process. But then after I got, I had most of the technical aspects, the structure, the structure probably set out, where it is, similar to where it is now, back in, I would say, 2012. And then from there, technically speaking, an outside observer would not be able to tell the differences. Believe me, the differences are massive, and it's just the little things in magic, as we were just talking about, the psychological things that just, make the experience what it's supposed to be for people. So a lot of that stuff had to be worked out, and the only way that it was worked out was by me sitting down and trying and failing over and over again, and then succeeding, and then you fail, you succeed, but you build up on that success. And so that's what I did with this routine. I built up on it for a very long time, my presentation, because believe me, I don't like a lot of the stories in magic and the way people present magic mostly. And when I went on Penn & Teller's Fool Us, Michael Close, a good friend of mine, and John Thompson, a few of the people working behind the scenes, they told me, Maddie, you need to be able to present it for television. And at first I was totally against this. I was like, guys, I'm a magician, let me do my magic, let me do it the way that I want to. But, I listened. I kept my ears open, I listened to what they were saying, and what they were saying made sense. So they gave me an idea of incorporating more of a pattern, and not necessarily a storyline, although there's, biographical elements in the presentation, there's humor, there's all these things. Not so much that, but just the idea of the symbolism of the fingers. And for that for me was, a great thing that I picked up while working on that show. That it had come to me before, but I had discounted it. I hadn't worked on it, but for that, we really worked on it. And then I've been using it ever since, taking that idea of people interlacing their fingers, and then that being that what you call symbiotic magic. Something's happening in one place, and then the same thing happens in another place, or similar thing happens in another place. That for me totally changed the routine, because then I could make it more about that person. And then I had been doing it, honing it for a few years, getting good results. And I remember one day, I believe this was a few years ago, I was performing a show in New York, and the show was okay. I didn't do as good as in the show. It's one of those things, when I'm performing, I need a microphone. Anyways, I didn't have a microphone for that show. My voice isn't very loud. Or maybe I did have a mic. I don't know. I didn't feel very loud. So I had trouble communicating with the audience, but I was doing the show. And one of the guys who was in the audience was my friend David Blaine. David Blaine came up to me after the show, because he loves that part of me, getting everybody to interlace their fingers together. He came up to me after the show, and he's like, we were talking about it. He said, you gotta, maybe you can do something different. And we started playing with the idea of people interlacing their fingers together. Instead of the cards separating, why don't it's a beautiful thing when everybody interlaces their fingers. What if you could have people interlacing their fingers together? So that's what he suggested to me. And a few months went by. I started working out a presentation. I hadn't tried it. I went to a convention in Mexico, and we were doing a gala show. About 400, more than 400 people in the audience. And I tried out this new presentation. The show, mind you, was great. It was a great show. Me, Javier Natera, Denny Dortiz, Jan Frisch, Giancarlo from Italy, and Howard Hamburg. The lineup was amazing. Anyway, so I'm doing my show, my set, and I end with this. So I'm doing the oil and water, and at the end, I tell people there's already too much separation in life and in death, and I don't want to end like this. So I'm going to ask everybody to interlace their fingers one more time. Not with themselves, but with each other. And mind you, as I'm speaking, I'm giving a little bit of pause, and the translator, Javier, is saying all this stuff, repeating it, but in Spanish. And you could hear a pin drop in the room. The energy was so intense. Everybody interlaces their fingers, and it was just such a strong moment in that show. People, because there were many people in the audience that I knew, magicians who had come with their family and different people. People told me that they had goosebumps. People in the lobby, friends of mine after the show, told me they had goosebumps. They had never, experienced anything like that. And for me, that became, an amazing thing, which, I've played with the script throughout time. And you always have this weird thing. I'll talk about we talk about the psychological aspects, but it's one of those things, and that's the evolution. Not only looking at the physical structure, but then the presentational structure and how it affects people and how those emotions change through the different phases. And as you've seen, sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's sad, sometimes it's serious, but there's always different emotions in the room. And it's one of the things as an artist, trying to figure out those emotions and then move them to different places, move the audience to where you want to go and go with them to that place. So it's always it's an interesting process. I'm still learning. One of the things that I would love to do in the future, just talking about, because we're talking about the evolution of the effect, one of the things that I'd love to do in the future with this effect is make every single phase externally line up, because we have that beautiful image for the first few phases where we have that line of cards as they're being dealt red, black, red, black, red, black. That's from René Levin. Who popularized just that layout, and then turning over the 3 and 3 the way he does. And for me, that's, that is one of those external structures of the routine. If you were to take a photograph, boom, right there, imprinted, you have that image. In the later phases, I lose that. I don't want to lose that, but that's how it is now. And so for me, the evolution going forward is figuring out how to build up on that structure and make that external structure reflect the inner structure, because the inner structure is so beautiful, but then you have the outside discrepancy, the changing. Scaniu talks about this in his book, I believe in maybe volume 1 or volume 2 of the Ascanio books. But anyways, in one of the books he does talk about it, and he talks about how you can, when you are doing repetition, in a multi-phase routine, how the importance of keeping the external reality the same through the repetition. Very interesting stuff, and it's something that, because everybody knows that as soon as you change the rules, if you have a multi-phase thing, if you're changing the rules, you can change the method. And one of the things about magic and building something out is repeating something under the exact same conditions. or technically you're making the conditions more difficult every single time, but you're keeping the same external structure. And it's something that Scanu talks about. So for me, moving forward, that external structure is going to change. You're going to see the cards laid out in a line on a table, just like in the first two phases. You're going to see that eventually in the third phase and the fourth phase. In terms of sleight of hand, there's a few things that I can do technically to accomplish that, but there's also other tools that I could use in combination with the sleight of hand, as in terms of gimmicks and other devices to facilitate that. And it's already something that I'm looking into. One of the things, though, because there's always a sacrifice, that's one of those things about making artistic choices, that there's always a sacrifice. There's a pro and there's a con. So, being able to do that, I'd have to make some sort of sacrifice or change some moments in that, because I would have to switch out a packet or be manipulating extra cards or steal away and, switch out certain cards. So it does leave some challenges. It's definitely a challenging thing. But I am looking at it and looking at making that. So that's like the process. If you want to see the overall process of, we're looking at a piece of magic, somebody working on it for over a decade. That's what it's like, and that's where it is now, becoming more and more happy with the presentation. Also changing the story. I have a story that I want to tell. It's an interesting story. I don't want to give out too much away because I'm not too sure if this is the routine for a bit, but I think the future version of it is going to be called The Valley of the Living and the Valley of the Dying. And it's a story that I've been writing and working on. It's a poem. It's it's a very beautiful story. So I want to incorporate that into the routine. But as you can see, the routine is already so modular in terms of presenting. Me getting rid of phases, getting rid of lines, adding humor, taking away humor. So it's hard to have a set story from a presentational standpoint, because that obviously excludes a lot of that energy from the audience. So that's, look, this is it. This is the process, the evolution of a piece of magic, a piece of art, really, and just a little behind the scenes on what's going on in my mind as I'm doing all the stuff and working on it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I hope as the years go on I can do another update in terms of the evolution and really bring it to different places. I don't know if I'm always going to like the new places, but we're going to be going new places. Thank you.